afternoon, Amber. I am so excited that you're here. I can't believe we've only known each other for a week because I just feel like so connected with you and I love it.
Likewise. I'm so excited to be here. This is exciting.
Thank you so much for taking some time out of this awesome summer day. I know you have kids and back to school is happening, and so it means a lot to me that you're here. This is Amber Perrodin, artist and community manager at Cash and in just Northwest Arkansas more broadly. I love your story and how you are like a native, which is kind of hard to find these days. And I can't wait to hear about how you've seen this area grow and how you've grown with it and also shaped how it's been evolving. So I'd like to start at that beginning. What was it like for you growing up? You grew up here. What did you do? Did you always love art? Those sort of things.
Yeah. What a beautiful intro. Thank you so much. So I am just for your audience, like a 5th generation Springdale, Arkansas native, which is a funny thing to say. Like I sometimes am like, is that crazy that like we haven't left? But also I'm really, really proud of it. And I've been able to kind of take that pride and spin it in my favor, I think sometimes. But so I grew up mostly in downtown Springdale. We moved to downtown whenever I was 10. My entire family for the other 4 generations have also lived in the downtown area. So I feel like that's another like little anomaly that we've all kind of been in the same region for that long. Growing up here was awesome. I mean, I also speak from a place of like complete and total like white privilege, but and in recognizing that, like I growing up, it was nice for me. It was really nice. I was really into sports and also really into creating with my hands. And I was often taking things from like the recycle bin or the trash can and like reconfiguring them into things. My mom's like, what if you try, like paint or something? So I've always I've tried my hand in a lot of things as a kid growing up. And so, and I spent a lot of time in nature as a kid. My dad was an avid like sports, outdoor sportsman as far as like fishing and hunting and hiking. We did a lot of that. And so I learned at a young age to draw inspiration from nature and to connect with nature. And so, I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely. And I think, no, it's such a cool, it's like what I imagine is like a picturesque, like Arkansas upbringing. A couple of weeks ago at the start of the summer, I went on this bike ride and I saw a group of young girls in matching helmets and matching bicycles. And this man was leading them. And I was on my bike and I was like, this is interesting. I was like, oh, was it summer camp? But it was like April. It was like too early to be summer camp. And so we all were at the same stop sign and I asked them what they were doing. This is like our gym class. We're going out in nature on the trails today. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I grew up in Queens. Our recess was a parking lot with a kickball. Like we got hurt a lot. And I just think that to have that nature right there was such a special thing. Like now I'm like terrified of a tick bite and here people are like, oh, you just like, you pull that thing out. Like you like, that's not a skill set I was raised with. So I'm envious on many levels, but I wonder if you could speak to, like, you grew up in downtown Springdale, and for some people, a downtown is like 30 minutes from the nature. But what was that like for you? Like, how were you getting out in nature all the time?
So our go-to place when I was growing up, sorry, I have to take my glasses off.
No, you're
we would go to Hickory Creek, which is in Springdale, and it's a little or not a tributary, but a little section, like a cove of Beaver Lake, which is like a large body of water, our source of like drinking water in Northwest Arkansas. And it's huge. So that's where we would spend a lot of time, mostly because my dad, he loved to be on the boat. And so we did a lot of camping out in that little area. So it wasn't far. That's like a 10-minute drive from our house from downtown. So that's honestly where I spent a lot of time. My dad was also, I didn't expect to talk about my dad so much, but that's funny. He was really into lakes and dams. Like dams fascinate him. And so we spent a lot of time like exploring dams. And so that was often like our excuse, like you need a reason to kind of go and see the dam. And so we'd go explore the dam, or we'd ride our boat, take the boat over to the dam. So that's what it looked like a lot for me growing up. And my dad, this is one of my favorite things that I've cherished from him. He passed away in 2017. So I do hold him near and dear to my heart. I'm such a daddy's girl, if you can't tell. but he called it treasure hunting. We would go out in the woods. And so as a little kid, that's how I was sort of convinced. I didn't really need convincing, but that was the draw for me. Like, let's go out here and search for treasures. And I'm like, ooh, like what can we find? And you would not believe, Cara, like what we would like go through, but sometimes we'd find like old junk piles, and we'd find like cool glass bottles, and like that would be fun to find. But beyond that, we were looking for like different kinds of plants. My dad really loved wild edible plants, and like he started teaching me about like what you could forage and find in the woods. And so that's what we were doing. I mean, that's how we would go spend our time in the woods, is looking for treasures.
Oh my gosh.
And oftentimes, like, you know, so the treasure, like looking back on it now and sort of poetically, like that treasure was just like that time together and like learning about bird calls and, you know, just different things like that. So
oh my gosh, what a special experience, and so many cool memories with your dad. I'm so glad that he came up and gets to be part of this conversation. And I love what you mentioned too about finding these like piles of like things that people have, I guess, like abandoned or whatever. I took one class in college that like you had to take something that was like tangentially related to science. Maybe it's something that was like tangentially related to culture. And I took a nature philosophy course, which was like totally out of left field for my interest. But it was so interesting. We talked about like what constitutes nature. And if a car has been abandoned in the woods for 50 years, like it's become part of the natural thing. Like there's so little of the world that humans have not touched. And I think to actually see those things in your backyard on those treasure hunts would be so cool.
That's interesting. I took a philosophy of art class in college, and it sounds very similar. Like, at what point does something become art? And so, like, I can imagine that's what you guys were talking about too, like in nature, like,
yes,
how, like, what's the intention, and at what point does this return to nature or not be, you know? Those conversations fascinate me. I loved that philosophy of art class that I took, because I'm like,
oh my gosh, I think we're gonna have to make a program that's just entirely devoted to like debating these big questions, because
yeah.
So you mentioned this course you took in college, and so you were growing up here, you were loving nature, loving art, loving making things. What did you decide to do when you graduated high school?
It was sort of a no-brainer for me to go into high school. Is really when I really tapped into my artistic skills. I mean, I was doing it in junior high. We made, there's a basket weaving class that I took in my junior high that sort of shook me into thinking about other mediums and how like there's a broader way to like use my hands besides drawing. Because I love drawing, but I'm not like, it's just not my thing. But that always felt like that's what art was for me as a kid. And so, yeah, once I tapped into I had a really phenomenal teacher in high school. Her name's Carla Caraway. We're still close friends. She lives out of Fayetteville right now, but she really empowered me to just like explore. She had this amazing closet in high school that was just full of materials. And so I took a couple of classes with her in high school and then stuck with it through all of high school. So, towards the end, it was just like, just make things and turn them in, and I will grade them as assignments. Cause I was producing a lot. It wasn't like, I just wasn't messing around in art class. Like I was having a good time. So once I graduated high school, it was just a no-brainer for me to continue on. And in full transparency here too, I also became pregnant right out of high school. And that's a big part of my story is I became pregnant with my oldest daughter. Her name is Rain. She just turned 18 and she's about to start college too at the School of Art at the university. So really proud of her. We've had a fun, long journey together, and that's a whole other story in itself. But yeah, so I became pregnant, and that's what propelled me, to be totally honest, into college, because I'm like, okay, I have to grow up a little, and I need to focus on my child now. It's not just about me. So that propelled me and motivated me to like stick with getting this degree. I refused to be put into a box of like a single mom, single young mom. So I was really trying to push back on that perception and stereotype. And so that's probably honestly what's propelled a lot of the energy of what I've done, because I'm like, I just refuse to be put down into this like thing of suffering and being a victim. So yeah, so that's, I mean, I went from there, and then I actually went to NWAC for a couple of years, got my Associate of Arts degree. I started there, and then went over to the University of Arkansas to pursue my Bachelor of Fine Arts.
Oh, that is so cool. And I'm so glad like these new parts of your life that I'm not privy to are coming up, because I've met so many kick butt mamas on this show. And I think that not only were you just like, refusing to let the world put you in a box, but it brings this whole skill set that you just can't possibly have unless you've lived through taking care of another human. And so I think that that just makes the connections that you see in the art and nature come together more probably. And like, I can't imagine, and I'm sure you can't imagine what your life would have been like if it was a different path. Like it's so cool how
yeah, there's no way to even think of. I honestly, Cara, I bought a Volkswagen bus. This is a little snippet. I bought a Volkswagen bus when I was 17, and I had plans. I was going to hit the road, and I was going to work on organic farms and trade for letting me like live out of my van. That was my legitimate goal. I wanted to do that for a couple of years and then go to college. But I think that my trajectory would have been so completely different. I would have gotten out of Springdale. Things just would have changed. And not that that's bad or good in either way, but it would have been so completely different. So yeah, my life would have, the story would be very different had I not had Rain when I did. So she's a total gift and blessing, and I've always seen it that way.
Yes, and I think that you ended up bringing the whole world here as a result of it. Like instead of going out to the van, and like we are thankful for it and here for it completely. So you got this degree in fine arts at the U of A, and then you continued to like pour into the community, and like after like eventually in your story you end up with Downtown Springdale Alliance. You end up creating the little craft show from scratch. But like, how did those things become part of the narrative?
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is just my personality. I'm very empathetic, and I grew up hearing these romantic stories of Springdale, especially downtown Springdale, and how it used to be, and how it was once this thriving economic community that where everybody lived. There wasn't a question of whether you lived in a different town around here. It was downtown Springdale. And all that shifted once the Highway 71 came through. And so it just sort of has struggled during that transition. And so part of me always wondered like how we could breathe life back into that. And so I met my husband now. We've been married for 14 years now. But I met him in college. He was studying philosophy. So back to that philosophy thing.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, what is philosophy? I'm like Googling philosophy, and I'm like 19 years old. I'm like, what even is that? But he's so intelligent. I call him my left brain because I definitely like struggle in the left brain stuff. I'm like, I have the big ideas and creative energy. But nonetheless, I feel like meeting him, I forget what the question was. Oh, meeting him, and we moved to Springdale together. And he was new to Springdale and was just like, what is this? Like, how come there's not very many people? Like, how can we, breathe life into this? And so together we started this grassroots movement. Honestly, he was just like, if we're going to move to Springdale, it has to be worth it. Like he wanted to be in a community that like was bikeable, and that where you could like see friends and people that you knew. And 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the story here. It was very, very different in Springdale. And so, boarded up stores, and it was kind of a little sleepy ghost town. With lots of people trying to already do like really beautiful things. So I definitely don't ever want to take credit for like coming in and like being that force. But I think that we brought a lot of inspiration to people by showing them what was possible in Springdale. And instead of something we always heard was Springdale would be better if it had, like fill in the blank. And so Jonathan and I started saying like, well, we have a bike shop, or we have a coffee shop. It just might not look like what you think it should. And so we started just telling that story and flipping that narrative of like scarcity into abundance, and showing that like we have everything that we need to be a cool downtown. We have beautiful people that live here and are dedicated to this space. So let's start telling those stories. And so that was an effort we called Team Springdale, and that's like a grassroots movement that we started that kind of pivoted everything. That happened, I kind of got the chronological order of all these events wrong, but we started the little craft show before then, right out of college. Jonathan and I both graduated around 2008 to 2010, which was the recession. And saying that now, like, maybe doesn't have a big impact on people, but at that time, there was like a hiring freeze. Everybody was just kind of holding tight to what they had. People were cutting jobs because they didn't have the money to support their staff. And so trying to find a job right out of college was ridiculous. We started saving our rejection letters because it got humorous. We're like, well, we got rejected again. Like,
and they sent letters?
They would send, yeah, because we were applying to like universities. Like, we're like, we have a bachelor's degree now. Like, don't you want us to be your academic advisors? And we were just hiring, like we were going out everywhere. So they actually would send like formal, thank you for applying to this position, but you weren't chosen. So we started saving those. So with that said, having 2 children, Jonathan and I have a daughter together, and he wound up adopting Rain. Long, cool, beautiful story. But our youngest daughter, her name's Esma. She's about to turn 13. But she, we took that energy from not being able to find work and using our skills as creatives. Jonathan's also, he's now a practicing sculptor. We took those skills and just said, like, let's start a craft show and like just sell what we are making so we can make some money for Christmas, so we can literally buy Christmas gifts for our daughters. That was our intention. And to just, have a little network, a fun little event that we called the Little Craft Show. That was in 2011, like a year after I graduated from college. Jonathan just rode his bike by the windows.
You heard his name.
Got distracted. So yeah, we learned so much from that. And that's I could talk on that also for a whole hour. We learned so much from the Little Craft Show, from how to market an event, how to build a community around this. We realized very quickly that there was a niche for this. Like, people were thirsty at that time for a space to sell their work, sort of in an alternative market. When you said craft fair in 2011, especially in this region, there's one like godmother of them all craft fairs, which is the War Eagle Craft Fair. And that's what people think of. And I love that craft fair so much. I have a lot of respect for what they've been doing for 60 or something years. But they have a very specific aesthetic that they do at that show. It's kind of like country chic. And so I think that's evolved now. I can't speak on that, maybe the past 5 years or so. But at that time, it was like, that's where you went to go find your, your hand saw that's like painted with a landscape scene or something, which is cool in its own right. But what we started with the Little Craft Show was like sort of an alternative to that. It was like people that are younger that were making candles in their kitchen and designing their own brand and labels, and then starting their own like social media platforms to do it. And they have their own websites, and they look legitimate and they look amazing. And they just didn't have anywhere to go with their products. And so because they were such a small scale, they did not want to produce on the level that something like the War Eagle Craft Fair demands, because it has such a huge demand. You have to have a lot of inventory to show up to something like that, and a lot of skills and practice. And those people have it down to a science. So anyway, we were servicing a crowd that was in need of a space. And so we were able to like leverage that and run and grow the Little Craft Show for 10 years. And it just expanded and expanded. And we were even named as like the top, Martha Stewart named us one of the top 20 craft fairs in the world. And then Country Living Magazine named us one of 8 craft fairs in the country that like must shop at. So, and we were featured by Pinterest on an email as like the best craft show on Pinterest. So our Pinterest exploded. And that was like at the height of like when people were just starting to get into Pinterest. So we were able to take all of that and just blow it up. We learned so much. So we had all of that energy. And that's what I had to say all of that so you could understand, like, we had that energy and realizing like, oh, in order to make an impact, you just have to show up and you have to just be committed and stay positive and stay kind and just lead with love. And really the rest just sort of falls into place. We had no idea what we were doing. We didn't know how to, I had hardly even attended very many craft fairs beyond the War Eagle Craft Fair. So we just started things and ran them how we thought we would want them to be run, without very many business skills. We learned those along the way, but so we took that energy and applied it to Team Springdale to start circulating stories and narratives. And we had tapped into the Instagram pretty early on before algorithms were happening. And so we were able to gather a large audience to help support our efforts. So Team Springdale was fueled by a hashtag, which sounds insane right now. But we just asked people to use the hashtag Team Springdale, show us your side of Springdale. Like, what are you working on? What are you doing? What's, and people caught on and they were into it. They were like ready to do it. So all of that propelled my time at the Downtown Springdale Alliance. They were like, who's this girl that knows how to throw events and really loves Springdale?
It is Downtown Springdale.
Oh my gosh.
That's so cool. And
yeah.
I just think like the genuineness throughout was, like you said, just the clear propeller. Like you wanted to buy Christmas gifts and you wanted to create a platform for other people who also probably needed to buy Christmas gifts and had this talent, and you were like so eager to share with the world. And so I love how you found this need and you showed up for it. I think that is such a beautiful way to be part of a community and just like the best way to be engaged. I know the first time I arrived in Arkansas was like 2018, and you hear about the Grape Festival, First Fridays, and like the little craft show. Like these are so part of what is here and what's on people's radar, and also making it a destination for others, as you can see in your story with the Pinterest and Martha Stewart. I mean, that's wild and amazing. Yeah. You mentioned this Team Springdale, so part of it was a hashtag, but it was also like a group, like a cohort. Like, like it was an amorphous kind of thing.
I'm glad you asked that, because so many people are like, who's on the team? Like, what's that? Like, I'm like, it's really, we're all on the team. And our little slogan, we really adopted, we didn't come up with this, but teamwork makes the dream work. It's kind of a cliche that you hear. So we like adopted that. And I'm like, it's really like all of us are doing this. But we were able to start a few initiatives within Team Springdale. Once we were like building momentum, people were coming to us with ideas and like, can you help us like do something with this energy? So one of the really beautiful things that came from Team Springdale was the Springdale Taco Tour.
Yeah.
That was something that, and I don't know, I'm cautious how I talk about it because I don't want to offend people, but really, and this can still be true too today, but a majority of people, and I'll just be frank, like white people in Springdale saw the taquerias, these authentic Mexican restaurants, as a place that they didn't feel comfortable and they weren't sure if it was for them. And so I don't even like to use the word like them and theirs, like trying to break down those walls and show that those are just small businesses that need your support just like everyone else. So, and their food is really freaking good. Like, let's celebrate this and like flip that narrative on its head also and break down these walls so that we all feel comfortable flowing in and out of these spaces. So with the help of one of my dear friends, Mariana Jones and Stephen Jones, Mariana's from Guadalajara. And so she was a driving force in this, where she was able to help us access these business owners and go into these taquerias and say, we want to start a taco tour where you don't have to pay us or do anything. We just want to put a sticker on your window and show people that like they can come in here and eat. And again, use a hashtag, because that was kind of cool in 2013. Use a hashtag that you've eaten here and like show us a picture, and then we'll send you like a free t-shirt or a free sticker just for doing it. And so that blew up too. People were so excited. They're like, cool, I'll go eat some tacos to try to win a t-shirt. And then what happened in the process of that, like, of course, like the gift of that entire thing was learning that they could, go into these spaces and feel welcomed and loved. And so, and it was reciprocal. You know, the business owners were so grateful. I mean, their businesses were increasing just because, you know, they were now servicing a new clientele that maybe didn't necessarily, and I can't speak for all Caucasians, you know, but I do think that was definitely part of the story at that time, that a they them sort of language. And so we were trying to address that creatively. And I'd like to think of that as sort of my artistic practice is also this community work. It sort of satisfies the same itch as making art does for me. So it's almost like the community is my canvas. It's like, well, how can we like creatively problem solve this solution that like involves tacos? Like, I think we can come to a solution.
Surely there's a solution for eating delicious tacos more.
Yeah, so it worked. You know, it was fun, and it still exists. It's, if you go to our website, it's still out there. We don't have the t-shirts or stickers anymore, so we're not like giving those away, but we got some funding from the Springdale Chamber of Commerce. They gave us $1,000 for the taco tour, so we were able to buy a bunch of maps and stickers and t-shirts. And so that's what launched it, kind of got it off the ground. So that's how we were able to like give stuff away.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and then we did the Springdale Art Initiative too, which is something that it didn't take off as much as we wanted to, but it was something. We were able to work with the City of Springdale and the Parks and Recreation Department to get a mural at the Aquatic Center. We just did like a big public call for submissions, and we used I used my skills in getting sponsors for the little craft show and applied that to Team Springdale, and just like went after a sponsor and was like, you pay an artist and we'll do everything else. So that happened. But then, am I breaking up? Can you hear me?
A little bit, but I have not missed anything yet. We're good.
Okay, good. I got hired by the Downtown Springdale Alliance, like kind of at the tail end of all of that. And so I had to propel my energy into my efforts there. So Team Springdale, I feel like it served its purpose. It did this really beautiful thing of bringing people together and shifting that narrative of Springdale. And I could then put that energy into like actually doing things under the umbrella of an organized company that was, you know, dedicated to downtown Springdale. Yeah. So it was sort of a natural flow. So Team Springdale kind of has taken the back seat. It still has social media. We'll post things every now and then and do some fun stuff, but it's kind of sleeping right now.
But I think that's really cool because, you know, like when like it was completely needed when there was no downtown Springdale like association, right? And now you kind of like join forces, where like your platform gives voice to this other one that's emerged that has different resources and a new life. And so that's really cool how they complement each other. But I also love how you spoke about like getting sponsorships or getting stickers on the doors. And I think I'm always very interested in the logistics of how these things get done. And so I wondered if you could share any wisdom from that sponsorship phase and asserting like the validity of these experiences. But also I'm always thinking when there's public stuff that there's like government roadblocks. And like, I think in small towns, it's a little bit easier, thankfully, because there's less red tape. But did you need to get like permits? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, that scares
me.
You ask the best questions. It's so good. Yeah, so I think that a lot of people, and myself included, sort of had that mindset of like, what do I need to do to like get this done? And instead of, I just quit asking for permission, to be honest. I was just like, okay, I have this idea, and I would just like figure out what I needed to do to get that done. So for things like the little craft show, we didn't need to have any permits because we were doing it indoors. We did eventually move it to downtown Springdale. And that required like shutting down the street. And because I worked at the Downtown Springdale Alliance while I was also bringing the little craft show to downtown Springdale, we started a spring event in Springdale. I was the one sort of building those policies on like, what do we need to do in order to close down the street for the Shiloh Square in downtown Springdale, and helping refine what that process was like with the police department and stuff. And so, but it was really a simple forum. They just want to know, like, why are you trying to close the street down? What do you need to do? How many people are you expecting? Will there be alcohol? And that's basically it. And then you would submit it to the police department, and they would either say, yeah, you can do this, or like, this doesn't work for whatever reason. And so we refined that, and then we're able to, whenever I was at the Downtown Springdale Alliance, make that process ownership of the Downtown Springdale Alliance. So if you wanted to close down the street in downtown Springdale, you had to come to the Downtown Springdale Alliance, and then we would walk you through what that process looks like, and made that more accessible for people, because that is a barrier for people that come through and say, I have a cool idea, where the heck do I even start? And so the Downtown Springdale Alliance became that safety net, and we could just like kind of walk you through what that looked like, and then simplified all those processes. So it wasn't like you had to go to the police department or talk to the mayor or whatever to make stuff happen. So yeah, that's that administrative part behind the scenes is kind of sticky sometimes. I encourage anyone that has a vision, organizations like the Downtown Springdale Alliance that are really interested in helping you like see that through. So don't be afraid to reach out to people. I think that's it. I think that's like the golden ticket. Like, don't be afraid. And you know how to do that, Cara. I mean, that's how we met, because you're just like, hey, I'm doing something really cool and would love to talk with you. I mean, people are people, and I'm not intimidated by titles. I don't think that that's, you know, I think at the end of the day, everyone wants to do well and leave some kind of legacy for themselves and their family or whatever, or just some kind of impact. Like you want to do something that feels good for yourself and the community. And most people are doing that in whatever way that looks like for themselves. But yeah, I think that when you can just look at people like that and just say, like, from human to human, like, I have this idea and I want to do it, you know, with respect and kindness to everyone. I think it just like that cracks open the door for people to be like, well, let's help you. Let's figure out what we need to do. So,
but I think in that process too, the genuineness is so important. So like when I was in college, I had this magazine and I wanted it to be this like whole thing. And I would go like pitch different businesses because I wanted to like collaborate with them. But I felt at the time as like barely 21 that I needed to assert some sort of like, I know what I'm doing. Like I'm an expert at this. And that like people were nice still, which was amazing. But like it was so much less authentic than it could have been if I led with this the genuine desire to connect people through this like female driven storytelling, you know? And like I think that's what makes it easier to reach out to people now is like I don't claim expertise on any of this. Like we're having a fun conversation like we would if I met you at the little craft show. But like you just leading with the intention, I find that makes so many more barriers go away too. And I'm so encouraged when groups like Downtown Springdale or any group, they have their emails on their website. Like that should already be a check for people that like they want to talk to you. Like they're not hiding. They also, if they're on social media, even better, like you can direct message anybody who has a public account in a kind way and not in a like super repetitive way. But
yeah,
all of that.
Definitely. I think that I applaud you for, I mean, that magazine, I would love to hear more about that sometime. That sounds really ambitious and awesome. And that's what we were doing with the little craft show. I mean, we were going into businesses with a little PDF that I had designed and was like, hi, you've never heard of this event and you've never been to it, but we really believe in it and we think it's going to be really freaking cool. And your business definitely wants to be a part of it. And like, we were just trying to sell it like that. But it was like building relationships with those business owners and then nurturing those and staying with those people. And what we wound up doing too is following up with people. I used to be way better at this, but I would take care of people so much. I mean, I would send cards and then I would stop by and just be like, how's your business? Like, what do you need? Like, do you need help promoting this new thing that you're doing? Because we have a platform now that people are watching. And so they would sponsor us because they knew that we would, you know, put them out in the world and help get some traction. And so, yeah, I think, I exhausted myself, to be honest. It was a lot of work, but I did show up and, you know, just became friends with these people. And so it made that follow-up the next year a lot easier to go in and just be like, hey, are you in a place to be able to sponsor us again this year? And it's okay if you're not, but we would really love to be a part of it. And here's how we're going to do it this year, because it's totally different than last year. And we did all kinds of weird stuff. Like, it's kind of common, and maybe not common, but I've seen it done now really well. But we were doing like a bingo, like we'll put your business on this bingo card and you have to pay to get on the bingo card, but we will make it damn worth your time and money to be part of this. And so we would just like blow it out of the water to try to make sure it was worth everyone's time and money. And we did that with our vendors too. It's something I'm really proud of. We you know, like made friends with our vendors and made them feel like they were loved and supported, and really tried to nurture a community there. So people, whether or not your sales were good, you still felt like you were a part of something bigger. You know, you had a network of people and you felt supported. And yeah, so I try to do that. And everything that I do, honestly, is just build community, because it's, and I think just showing that humanity of people is like that, that's the golden ticket. Like when you just can just break down the walls and be like, that's a human, they have, you know, we're all fighting like hell for something, we're all suffering from something, and just recognizing that and saying like, how can we work together, how can we support one another amidst all of that. So
I love how you were honing that skill of bringing people in and recognizing their dignity. In social work, we talk a lot about making sure that everyone has a chance to be part of the decision making. And I think even when there was like a plan for what a sponsorship looked like, you just like, you fully showed them the vision and the mission and like what it was going to do. And like there was room, like in the there was ample time for them to then be able to like give feedback if that was like a thing. And I can see how that would segue really well to your more direct, like you know, Downtown Springdale Alliance work, and ultimately like cash now and everything else that you do, just really leading with that equity and giving everyone something to be proud of in their city. Because if you feel like it's you against the world, like fighting to survive there, it's not the environment that we all want to go listen to music in and have snacks.
It doesn't work. It just like absolutely doesn't work when you do it, when you approach it like that. Like you can maybe make that, you can sustain that for a minute, but yeah, when it's like a competitive, I don't know, it gets sticky, and then you're doing it for the wrong reasons, and then everything kind of implodes. And so, and I've been there. I have, you know, I have those stories to tell too, but it, you know, I think just, I really believe in that, like rising tides. You do your thing really well, there's room for all of us. There's abundance everywhere. Like there's no competition. And so really living in that space keeps you safe and protected and inspired. Otherwise, like it just, it's chaotic and depressing. So I refuse to like dip into that. It's too much.
It's too much. And we get to choose how we see the world, and we should see it from a place of abundance if we can. I love that perspective. And so I want to make sure we have time to talk about cash, but also just like really curious about the transition from more grassroots to like organization based planning and stuff, because I feel like that would be different. It would be different skill sets. One is like maybe more like corporate-ish, and like, can you talk to that transition? And then we will make our way to cash, because I'm very curious about what you do there too.
I would say that was not an easy transition for me, because I basically just paid even through high school and then college, and then not being able to find a job, and then creating a little craft show. So I was self-employed basically until I started working at the Downtown Springdale Alliance. But I learned a bunch of administrative skills. Hopefully it keeps saying my internet's unstable. Hopefully we're okay.
We're here. We're good though. No worries.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'd sort of honed in those administrative skills, or tried to. I was practicing a lot with the little craft show. I was having to communicate with sponsors and vendors every day. That was a full-time job to communicate with them. At our peak, we had 300 vendors a year between our different shows. So there was a lot of communication between venues and vendors and sponsors and et cetera, et cetera. So I was able to take that into the Downtown Springdale Alliance. But yeah, that transition from, I'm no longer just telling my story for my company. I'm having to tell like a broader story for this company that I'm working for, that was also a startup. I mean, they had just been formed as a nonprofit. They hired an executive director, and then she hired me as a programming director. And then we both sat across from each other like, okay, what are we gonna do? Like, how do we do this? And I'm like, I don't know. All I know how to do is throw events and get people excited about places. And so she was like, okay, run with it. And I'm like, okay. So I created just a ton of events. And I wouldn't say I did it right, because we did a lot. We were trying to make waves, and we were trying to establish this the Downtown Alliance is something significant. Showed up above and beyond trying to build this company. So that was interesting and a little tricky, but also it was a pretty seamless transition for me. I was also still trying to run the Little Craft Show and Team Springdale, and excuse me,
No worries.
been like mentioned is the company my husband and I started, Perrodin Supply Company, selling like artist supplies. I had a lot on my plate and it felt like I was a little bit like it was too much. And I was young, and so I didn't know what my capacity was, but I was learning at that point, like, okay, I do have a limit and I think I'm hitting it. So I had to start cutting back with the craft show. I started hiding without compromising the integrity of the show. So yeah, it's been an interesting transition, and I think that like I learned all those administrative, communicative skills through the craft show, and then started honing it with my work at the Downtown Alliance, and then applying it to what I'm doing today too.
Yes, I love how you've been building your career as you've gone, even if you didn't know what the destination exactly was going to be. I think the recurring idea there is like when you're in a situation where nothing else is moving around you, like create it. Like you created opportunity for Springdale, created opportunity for yourself in a recession. And like so Downtown Springdale Alliance obviously was focused on Springdale, but Cash is like more broad Northwest Arkansas arts community impact, right? Like how did you decide to make that move, or how did it come about? What do you do there?
Yeah, so it's I took a year off in 2019. I stepped down from the Downtown Springdale Alliance in 2018 to just catch my breath, because there was a lot of momentum that had been happening with Team Springdale and the Little Craft Show, and then all the events that I was producing at Downtown Springdale Alliance. So I was having to evaluate like my capacity and figure out like what I needed to do to take care of myself. And so my husband had convinced me, again, my brilliant left brain, where he's like, you might be just of equal or maybe even better service to the community when you're not in the system and you're doing something. Because this is my art gallery and my art studio behind me. And so we have this building. He's like, what if we're throwing artist events here and helping to build the narrative of this being a space for artists and makers to live and work? Because for those of you listening that aren't familiar with Northwest Arkansas, Springdale is still right now one of the cheapest places to live compared to the surrounding cities. And so, artists need affordable spaces to live and work. And so we were trying to push that narrative or move that forward, that Springdale is a place for artists. So I took a year off, really focused on my art career. And through all of this, I've been an artist. I've been making things. I have gallery representation. I've been, that's not consistent. I'm not like a mad artist, like in the back, like having to make art every day, but I do try to show up to it. And I can't say I've done a great job of that since I've started at Cash. It has taken a lot of my time and energy, and I'm trying to be, more mature about how I approach my work now. I'm not so much that hustle and grind mentality. I used to really embody that, like I have to get up and I have to stay up late and I have to, make sure I'm responding and staying on top of things. I'm more like, I have way more grace with myself now, where I'm like, that email can wait until maybe Friday. I don't know. Like, I don't have the time to, like, I'm
great. That is fierce.
So yeah, I took a year off, and then I could feel something big coming. Like I could feel that there was like opportunity again, or if I was going to be approached, to have an opportunity to do something. So I took that year, 2019, to rest, and then I decided also that it was time to release the Little Craft Show. And so I had a partner at the time, Monica Diodati, brilliant, amazing, incredible human. She stepped in as like the kind of co-curator with me for a couple of years. And so I decided to just hand it off to her in 2019, serendipitously, because 2020 was the year of, chaos and COVID, and it was not a good year to throw an event. So I was grateful that I'd sort of stepped out of that and had a moment to catch my breath too. in the midst of that, I was approached by Allison Esposito, who's the executive director of Cash. And I could go on and on about her. I really, truly, legitimately love her and respect her. She's an incredible human that has bounced all over the nation doing amazing work for arts ecosystems. And she functions on a level that like, I just cannot even comprehend. The way she speaks and moves and makes things happen just inspires me. So when I met her and she expressed interest in maybe bringing me on to do something with Cash, I was definitely interested. I was like, this is probably the big thing I've been waiting for. So
I love that.
yeah, it was pretty beautiful. And I mean, the opportunity that she ultimately presented to me was to help be the project lead on reimagining the Art Center of the Ozarks. That's a longstanding, in fact, it's the longest standing independent nonprofit arts organization in Northwest Arkansas. And they're kind of revisioning what they were doing as an organization, the Art Center of the Ozarks. And they were trying to figure out how to sustain their community theater space. And I think ultimately they made the choice to sell their building and figure out and sort of pivot what to do next from there. And so they sold it to the Tyson Family Foundation. Tyson Family Foundation and Cash partnered up, and they're like, what if we work together to re-envision this whole thing and change the narrative and flip it on its head and bring Amber Perrodin in. And so it's literally like 2 blocks from my house. It's in downtown Springdale, and it's leading the charge on like redefining the arts in downtown Springdale. So it was sort of a no-brainer for me. It was like, I was hesitant, and to be honest too, I'm still very scared. It's a big job. It's a big lift. And it's going to take all the community magic I have in me to make this work. But it's already working, and I'm learning every day to just trust and just, understand that it's all taken care of. And I've had to adopt some like spiritual mottos to like get me through this era, because if you just sit and think about the weight of rebuilding an art center that has a 50-year legacy, there's a lot that comes with that. There's a lot of people that have been impacted by this space, and so they're very protective of it, rightfully so, and trying to just do some healing around that and making people feel safe and seen, and also in the midst of COVID, it's just been like a kind of a crazy time. But yeah, that's my role now. Is my title is artist and community manager, but my role is specifically to be at that space. We need to rebrand it, so it's no longer the Art Center of the Ozarks. They are separate from us, and they're their own nonprofit, but they're no longer in that building. And so we get to rebrand it and just start from scratch. So it's a big, cool project, but I have a really, really awesome team. And that's one small thing that Cash, my company, does. Cash is focused on a regional redevelopment or development of like a creative ecosystem. And that's, I know, a mouthful, and I don't have time to unpack it, but but my role specifically is still in downtown Springdale, being an artist and helping to set a scene, basically. So it's fun and playful, and I knew, like, when I was approached to do this, that this was the next thing for me. So I started there in November 2020. So here we are.
So wonderful how you were like obedient to taking a pause, and you just like had this sense that like, I need to be ready, like something's coming, because it's going to enable so much for downtown Springdale that you're in that spot. I can't imagine a more perfect person for that role. And I think I've never taken on something as big as that, but I find that when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed, like, to remember that like it's going to take time. And so not everything has to happen in the same moment has been an encouragement for me. But also I heard this awesome phrase this week that like, we want to leave the world on empty. Like someone said like the graveyard is like the like wealthiest place of like, because people had these great ideas they didn't see through, or like this energy that they didn't fully give. And like, you give so much of what you do. And so I hope that you get to have re-energizing also. But I love that idea of like, just we have one life to live. Like, let's give it all. Let's do it all. Let's make this a place
Yeah. And thank you. And just knowing too that like, it's not going to be perfect, and letting go of that idea of, and I learned that years ago with the craft show, and I used to like white knuckle it, and I'm like, it has to be this way, and it has to, that the craft show really refined me as a human so much. But yeah, and I'm able to now apply that to the space. Like, it's okay every day. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just kind of clunking through it and forming policies, and we're like down in the weeds right now. We're not doing any of the fun, like sexy stuff that's like outward facing, but it'll be worth it, you know, in a year, whenever we've kind of got a solid foundation, because I'm really interested in doing the long work. And that's been part of my motto with downtown Springdale too. Like, this is a long game. Like, we are not going to shift this overnight, and then you have to keep showing up so that it doesn't get gentrified, which is like a whole other thing, and that's likely going to happen. But if we can be a little bit of a resistance to that, and maintain this as like a safe space for artists and people of color, then like, hell yeah, what a cool thing to fight for. So I'm just going to keep showing up and keep doing that, and know that it's going to take a long time. We can't just do that overnight. So I'm in it.
Completely. Thank goodness for it. And I love that we've kind of come back full circle too, to just your essence as an artist. You spoke a little bit earlier about how your community work kind of fulfills your like urge to create and to bring people together too. But I wondered if we could come back to just like the work that you still continue to do when time of avails. That is your personal art. Like, what are the themes of it? What is your, like, what keeps you motivated to do that work too?
Yeah, so that work is, you know, I went to college for art, and I got to study. When you go through the Bachelor of Fine Arts program, you get to test all the different mediums, from sculpture to ceramics, drawing and painting and printmaking. And I really discovered early on that printmaking was this really beautiful medium that I had never really familiarized myself with until college. And it was also, at the time, a medium. I was the only printmaking student, and so I sort of loved that too. I had the whole studio to myself most of the time, and I could explore that equipment. I really just need space to like create and brainstorm and be able to just like be sporadic. And that place afforded that to me. So I really have a passion for printmaking. I don't do a ton of that. I do have some printing presses here, but my medium right now is, I like to paint and do mixed media collage on birch panels. I wish I had grabbed one to have to show you.
Well, I'll get a photo of it and I'll put it on the social media to go with it,
Cool.
because I'd love to see it also.
Thank you. Yeah, so instead of like a stretched canvas, it's a piece of wood mounted on a frame. Kind of think of it like that. So I can like carve into it if I want to, or I can like glue paper onto it, or I can just paint on it. But when you hang it on the wall, it looks like a canvas. So that's that's my preferred medium right now. And my creative space, there's like a door back here behind, over my shoulder, that that's where my like actual studio, dirty studio is. If I had good internet, I would walk you back there. But Kara, you should come and see it sometime. But
Yes.
nonetheless, that's what I'm making. And I my work is, you know, I would describe it as like abstract. I mean, it is abstract. But for me, it's almost like my paintings are a lot like, so strange to kind of put it into words, but it's almost like poetry or like a diary, you know, when you're writing. I just pour a lot of emotion into it, whether it's, you know, and a lot of energy that maybe I'm not able to disperse in other ways. And so, yeah, it's hard to talk about it without people being able to see it, but I kind of, in large forms and abstract forms, I'm really inspired by nature, which I think most artists, a lot of artists like to say that, but I'd like to find these forms in nature and then sort of replicate them in my work, but they're abstracted. You wouldn't walk up to it and be like, but you do walk up to it and you think, this looks familiar, but I don't really know what I'm looking at. So they're very quiet and sort of subdued works of art, but I have a very specific kind of color palette that I work with for no particular reason other than I'm just drawn to that. But yeah, I have something too, like I do now, kind of taking full circle from what I mentioned with my dad earlier and doing treasure hunts in the woods. I now am like way into foraging. I love wild medicinal and edible plants. I love learning about that. I still have so much to learn. That's a forever, a lifelong learning journey because there's just so much to know. And then you leave this region and then there's a whole other region that you just don't know. But I've really been trying to understand the plants and animals of the Ozarks. And so a lot of that translates into my work in ways that like most people probably just don't recognize in looking at it. But yeah, I don't know if any of that's making much sense.
Yes,
But
completely. No, I think it's beautiful how all the parts of your story are connected and the love of the Ozarks comes through and also how it propels you to keep learning about it and sharing that in the stuff you do. And I think it will come into your community work in so many different ways. Also, and then you mentioned that your art is like poetry, and you've actually done some like community collected art experiences too that were pretty poetic. You have the Ozark Story Project. And I wondered if you could just share a little bit about, I feel like that's like the perfect intersection of the community work and the art, and it's just a really
yeah,
cool idea.
yeah, thank you. That has been a project that has just evolved and evolved. And I've been working as an artist fellow with an organization called Looking for America. And this is my third year to be their artist fellow, which I would have never imagined that we would be together for 3 years, but we have just learned together and just continued to grow. But yeah, so that project, Looking for America, initially started with just bringing people together and having hard conversations, specifically around politics. That is not my project. I did not start that one. One of my friends, Philippa Hughes, who lives in Washington, D.C., she started that project, and then it went nationwide, and she had the opportunity to bring it to Northwest Arkansas, and so that's where she and I intersected. And then have just like grown a friendship from there to continue to do this work. So I'm kind of her liaison in Northwest Arkansas to help continue the work and dialogue here in Northwest Arkansas. Hence the reason I'm the artist fellow with them. So that project, I could talk at great length about that, but if you go to the ozarkstoryproject.com, it breaks down the history of all of that too and has some cool photos. But what happened between Philippa and I was once we completed the Looking for America project, she had an opportunity and a little bit of funding to support more dialogue in Northwest Arkansas. And so just through a casual conversation of us talking about where my current interests lie, and of course it's always like community, nature, and just love. And like, what do we do with that? And so I'd been reading Vance Randolph's book, Ozark, what is it called? I'm blanking. Ozark Magic and Folklore. Really incredible book. He's an interesting writer. It's not entirely coherent, but he was collecting data from people about like Ozark traditions. And I just got like kind of obsessed and really into it for a minute. And yeah, so I was telling Philippa that, and so she was like, I'm curious how, immigrant stories in Northwest Arkansas and immigrant folklore has been sort of brought into the Ozarks, and how that's like melding with the current Ozark folklore. And so we just kept talking about like what that looks like. And so what came from that is the Ozark Story Project, because we decided to pursue people and collect stories and see if that intersection of immigrant folklore and traditional Ozark folklore was an actual thing. Turns out that's a huge undertaking. The more I started meeting some like really incredible people, and the more I started talking about folklore and what that looks like, I realized that was going to be maybe a bigger lift than we had the time and capacity to research. So, but what we wind up pursuing was just stories of people that have an experience with the Ozarks, whether you're from here or you just moved here or you passed through one time and something weird happened. Like, we just wanted to hear those stories. And so we started the Ozark Story Project to collect written stories and also written recipes that were maybe from the Ozarks or inspired by the Ozarks. Again, my interest in like foraging and understanding the land, sort of, you know, and this project was encapsulating all of that. And it was just giving people a platform to tell their story. And we kicked this off in 2020 when lots of people were sort of in despair and lonely and in a place where they were having a hard time connecting with community because we were all in quarantine and confused, and then the social uprising that was happening. It was a hard time. And so this was just a small little glimpse, you know, of hope in the midst of all of that, of just like, hey, your story matters, whether it's hard or ugly or beautiful or miraculous, you know, just share that with us. And so we cataloged all of that on our website. I, of course, would have loved to have way more stories than we have, but we have a really beautiful collection. People, you could submit any photo and then write a story, you know, share about that photograph, what it means to you or what's happening in the photo. And then we did a community poem together. We asked people, what makes the Ozarks home for you? And then we limited it to a certain amount of characters. And so they would type that in, and then we compiled it all together and partnered with my friend Noelia Serna, who's a local poet, and she put that together and read it out loud as a community poem that we all wrote together about the Ozarks being home. And so, and we've done a couple of other things like that. We did a spinoff from that. Now that people, I mean, maybe not necessarily now, but we did an Ozark Social, which is like an in-person experience. We also did a virtual experience before then, but the in-person one, we did another community poem where we asked people, there was 3 writing prompts, I can't remember off the top of my head. And then Noelia was on site. She took those poems to a separate room, quickly pieced them together and put together this like amazing poem that she came back on stage and read. We were able to do that at the art center that I'm now running. So it's like, hey, I have a stage. We should just use this. So yeah, it's been a fun experiment, like a social experiment, to just sort of fill in the gap in a time when people weren't sure how to come together, you know, or weren't able to come together. So it's been an interesting evolution, and nobody knows this yet, and I'm happy to say it here, but we just got approved to create an Ozark Story Project cookbook. I don't know what to call it yet, but we're gonna compile all of the stories, and it'll have like sprinkles of poems and photographs in there. But yeah, it's gonna be like a little collection of, you know, like the old churches that have like the spiral bound cookbooks.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That's what we're gonna do that.
Cool. It's such a cool, like modern, diverse version of that. I'm here for it. And I think it's just such a powerful work that you're doing. I think about the sense of belonging a lot, or like people's sense of belonging, and how that's like its own social determinant of health. Like you just cannot thrive to your fullest capacity if you don't feel like you belong where you are planted. And so as much as we can bring that about for people or help them to see how they already belong here and we want them here, I think it's just a really important responsibility for each of us to take on. And I think you're just such a good social work role model, even though you have no training in it, because one of our responsibilities is to really simultaneously address the micro, which is like the individual level, the meso of the community, and the macro of just like policies and the country's state overall. And I think that your choice to take on these different swim lanes all at once and like see that they're going to add value to each other is just a really good and important way to look at the world and how we can impact it.
Awesome. That's cool. That's cool to hear. I really have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just
showing up. That is what it is. And so as we get ready to wrap up, I want to ask you, what's your approach or advice to people who are trying to get involved maybe in their towns more, or people who are creative and want to make community building part of their kind of story too?
Yeah, well, when you first said that, the first thing that came to mind was just start going to things, and go to things that interest you. You don't have to show up to freaking everything, because that's impossible. And I've also tried to do that, and it's not authentic. And at the end of the day, you just feel so energetically drained, and you maybe didn't make a friend like you hoped you would, and it just feels like a failure. So my thought is, find the things that interest you, whether that's like history, then like show up to some museums and like look at the programming that they're doing and connect with those people. If you're an artist and you're trying to get your name out there, like don't be ashamed to do a coffee shop show. Show up to a coffee shop and just say, hi, I have art and I want to show it. Or see if they're doing that. You know, if they're already showing art or something, you know, you just show up to the receptions that the artists are doing and network that way. So there's local galleries to connect with too. So I think like whatever your lane is, like whatever you feel passionate about or that gets you excited, just get involved. And something that I haven't even talked about that I really am truly passionate about is continuing education. That for me has brought me so much life and connections and creativity that like is beyond anything I could have imagined. In 2020, I did the Ozark, or what's it called? Northwest Arkansas Master Naturalist Training. And I learned so much about nature and community, and now I have this broad network of incredible educated humans that know all about these niche things, from like waterways to birds, I mean, and everything in between. And then also earlier this year, I took a small engine repair class with Rain, my daughter.
Oh
I
my,
know it's a long story, but there's a technical institute down the street, and they always post signs of like upcoming classes. And so, yeah, we were like, you know what, let's do that. That's what I got Rain for her 18th birthday. I was like, we're going to learn how to repair some engines, and we're going to rebuild some carburetors. And like, we have no idea what we're doing, but like, we're not afraid to show up and try. And so I think teaching Rain that too, like she's learned like, don't be afraid to just like walk into a thing and not have any answers. And so what came from that are some great friendships and networks, and now some new skills. And so that's another easy way to sort of build community, is just continuing education, and you learn something from it too. And then you meet people that are also passionate about the thing that you're curious about. And then what blossoms from that is the sky is the limit. And so that would be my best advice, is to just show up and don't overthink it. Just go out to a thing and say hi to someone and see what happens.
yeah. I love that you're doing it with your daughter too. Had it like, I felt like I was going through this rut in college where I was like, why the heck am I doing this? Like, why can we just like not? And my mom, over winter break, we spent a week. We went to a cooking class. We went to an opera for the first time. We like tried all these different things together, and like, not because any of them were necessarily going to be my future, but just it made the world feel fresh again and exciting, and like created space where we can keep trying new things, and we're not committing our lives to one path. I think it just opens our eyes when you know that continuing education, continuing career changes, these are all valid options. So I love that example you're setting. And finally, what do you want people to leave knowing about you and about your work? And what are you most looking forward to right now?
Oh my gosh. I don't know what I want people to know about my work. I think I just, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that one, but I do feel like, what was the second question?
What are you most looking forward to right now?
Oh my goodness. I am literally like living day to day right now. I think my brain is so much in cash world. And for people listening, that's CACHE.
Yes.
Like geocaching, but just cash. And that's an acronym. You can Google it later. But I'm so caught up in trying to get this art center off the ground. That's literally where all my energy is right now. I've not even been making art. And that's a fine balance that I'm personally having to wrestle with right now and figure out how to continue to do that. But yeah, that's what we have, another Ozark social coming up, and that's something I'm like actually really looking forward to. I don't have any details yet, except that it's going to be on the fall equinox. And so that's, I think, September 21st or September 22nd. And I'm going to try to do it outdoors, pending COVID situation. I don't know, that might be insane to even try to pull that off, but otherwise that's what I'm looking forward to. And this cookbook that I'm going to try to pull together before Christmas, because I would really love for people to be able to gift those, because it's going to have a lot of people's stories in it. And so I think it'll be a cool gift for people to share. So those are top of mind for me right now. And I think that, I don't know, I hate to not answer one of your questions, but I feel like what I want people to know about me and my work is just that, I don't know, I just try to lead with love. It's really something that comes up. I actually had a dream about that one time that, do you watch Parks and Rec? Do you know Leslie Knope?
I haven't, but I hear so many good things. Tell me the story.
Such a dumb, ridiculous show, but and I watched it several years ago, but she just loves like starting these campaigns. I really like, I don't know, connected with that character. But yeah, I had a dream about this campaign that I was going to lead, that it was like these little ceramic hearts and it just said like lead with love. And so I really think about that all the time, about how, and I want to like give out these little like badges that say like lead with love. So corny, but that's something I really try to embody and like think about in everything I do, from like being a mother to being a wife, to being a community organizer. Is just lead with love and let the rest fall into place, really. So.
And I think your story just affirms that is exactly who you are. That is so authentic to to Amber. And okay, I have to ask, do you happen to have like already written that on any rocks and left them anywhere? Because I'm pretty sure I was walking from the Bentonville Square the other day and I like literally took a picture, up to send it to you later, of a rock that said something like lead with love on it. And I think it's just like so wild that you mentioned that exact thing.
That's amazing. I cannot say that I painted on a rock, but that's great. I mean, it's like, it's kind of a cliche too, but it's impactful. You know, love is the root of all good things. And so I think when you can like tap into that, the rest just sort of, I don't know, it falls into place. And so if you're leading with fear or a scarcity mindset, then that's going to be the end result of your project. And so I've learned that the hard way, and we could have another episode to talk about that.
Truly, I feel like I could talk to you for days on end. I would just keep you awake and go through the whole chronology, but I'm so appreciative. I feel so surrounded by love from this conversation, and I hope it brings it to other people. But thank you, Amber. Truly, sincerely, it's been such a pleasure, and I'm so excited to share all the cool things that you're working on.
Thank you. It's been an honor to get to know you more too, and I hope we get to do this again.